Howdy folks, Greenside Project here, and today we're going to be talking about our friend Mr. Lahmian medium, and we're going to be discussing how we can use him effectively to help with our miniatures. I mentioned experimenting with this paint in one of my last update videos. I was using the paint to create glazes to even the skin tones of Esmeralda up here. And I actually ended up getting a lot of questions, a lot of comments about how to use the medium, how to mix it with paints and what sort of ratios to use. And it occurred to me that I've not really seen much, or not seen many videos anyway, about how to use Lahmian medium correctly or ideas of using it on YouTube. And I think that sort of in the miniatures hobby, there's people that already knew about using mediums to dilute paints, and they've been doing it for a long time, sourcing either from Vallejo or other acrylic paint manufacturers. And there's sort of the other side of people, if you've just not heard of it before, not much crossover. So today I'm going to be giving you some ideas of how I've used the medium to make different washes and glazes and how you can experiment with it. It's not the only uses of Lahmian medium too. In later videos I'll be showing you how to use it to apply pigments to weather vehicles, and also how to use it to help transfers cover a surface without wrinkling and that sort of thing. But today we're going to be focusing on washes and glazes. The first thing we're going to be doing is I'm going to have a quick talk, make sure that we're all on the same page with what we mean with a wash and what we mean with a glaze, because different parts of the hobby, different hobbyists seem to use the terms slightly differently, and they're slightly ambiguous on some of the sites I've looked, and I really want to make sure that we all understand at least what I mean by washes and glazes. So I'll see you in a second, and after we've gone through that, then we're going to have a look at mixing some paints. See you in a bit. I'm going to try and explain washes and glazes now using the power of line drawings. Imagine this is a cutaway of a miniature's face. When we apply regular paint, or hopefully when we apply regular paint, we want it to be really consistent. We want the same amount of paint covering every bit that we're painting, just like this. Now, when we apply a wash, at first we get lots of wash on our brush, and we put it all over the mini. However, the wash has less surface tension than the paint. So what the wash does is, it doesn't like being in the flat areas, it moves, it gathers in areas like here, and here, and here. Wherever there's a crevice, wherever we'd want shadow, the wash gathers. Like I say, that's because of surface tension, that's because of the nature of the liquid in the wash. That's really useful for us if we want to add shadow to a mini, and that's exactly what our washes do. That's exactly what GW washes do. Different washes that you buy from different companies, and for instance the difference between the current generation of GW washes and the previous one is how much paint gets left sort of on your large flat surfaces compared to how much gathers. Personally, I think that it was more consistent with the previous range of paints, where most of the wash would gather in the areas of shadow in the recesses, and only a little bit would be left over on top. Whereas with this current range of GW washes that you're used to, your Agrax Earth Shades, for instance, although most gathers in shadows, there's still sort of yet streaks over the flat surfaces. But that's okay, we can paint over it, that's not the end of the world. That's a wash. Now, a glaze, and just for consistency's sake, I'll also add our layer of lovely, even, properly diluted paint here. A glaze, we don't want it to collect in the crevices. What we want our glaze to do is, we want to apply it evenly, and we want it to stay in place. Because the purpose of our glaze is we're trying to even up colour, or we're trying to give a tint of colour to something that's the same in every area. Now, in the example I'd shown you before of Esmeralda, when I'd originally done her highlights and washes, it didn't look very organic. There's a big difference in terms of colour and tone between the shadows and the highlights of her. There was much more purple in the shadows than there were in the highlights. It just didn't look good at all. It looked very blotchy. You know, part of my limitations as a painter. But by applying a glaze like this, which equally covered all areas of her flesh, it gave everything a slightly sort of purple hue, and that evened things up. And that's a glaze, and that's what I mean today by a glaze. Now, if you listen to some fantastic painters much better than me, they talk about glazing, which is more selective glazing, whereby you keep getting thin layers of paint, or glaze I should say, that has enough surface area not to run, and you use it to slowly highlight up areas. Basically it's a form of very thin highlighting that looks very natural, very organic, and you do it in very thin layers. Now, Some people just refer to that as glazing. For my purposes, that's selective glazing. I'm by no means a master of selective glazing, although there are people on YouTube and on the old internet that are, so they're the people to check out for that. But the reason I just wanted to include the bit about selective glazing is so you know what I'm going on about compared to other people who talk about glazing the cloak up, for instance, is a phrase you might see. That's what they mean. So we know what a wash is. We know what a glaze is. Hopefully you know what purpose both of them serve. Now we're going to look at how we use Lahmian medium to mix them. I'm going to be mixing just on the lid of a clamshell. And the paint I'm going to be mixing into, just because it's the example I used on Esmeralda, is a bit of Nagroth Night, which is a base paint. Nice and thick. So, I'm going to get some out. I'm going to get a good... Where's that camera gone? There we go. A good pop out, a good blob out there. And it's quite thick, as most base paints are. I'm using a really old brush here that I normally use for various... Well, it's a synthetic brush, so I use it for sort of PVA glue and anything alcoholic and things. But for today it'll be absolutely fine. Next, it's time to add some of our Lahmian medium. So I'm going to give it a shake. Now, the one thing you do have to be careful about Lahmian medium, only because you don't want to waste it, is because it's a clear paint, it's very easy, if you're mixing paints using one brush, to mix some colour into it. You don't want to do that. So I use one of these, a pipette, a dropper. And it's actually a dropper that I got with my airbrush. And although I don't tend to use it too much with the airbrush, I certainly do find myself using it quite a bit for mixing Lahmian medium in. So first let's give it... That's one. Let's give it 2, 3 drips like that. And let's try mixing it in. Now, this stage of things really was, when I first did it, just in terms of experimenting. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what I'd see. Let's have a look now. If we hold up to the light, we can see there's some transparency in our paint. We want it to be semi-transparent. It's still, though, it's not like if we'd water it down, would be running all over the place. It's still holding, which is good. That's why it's a glaze, but it's not there yet, so I'm going to add... Oh, now, I'll be honest, that was a bit more than I expected, but from looking at it, I think that might be nearly there now. Now, there have been times where I've wanted to really change the colour of something, where that would be dilute enough with the wash. But I think I'm still going to add a little more of our medium. So that's 3. So overall I've probably put in, let's say that's 3 plus 2 for the meaning 5, plus at least 3. So that's about 8 parts, or 8 drops of glaze to 1 part paint. Let's have a look. Now, very importantly with my glazes, what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that my brush doesn't have too much on, because even though it's a glaze and not a wash, if we do have too much on our brush, just because of the sheer quantity, it will start sticking to our recesses. So I've done that now. I've got this oldie model here, which is a high elf archer from years and years and years ago I found in my bit box. He is undercoated with a very thin grey undercoat for my airbrush that I did today. I'm just going to apply the glaze onto him now. And as you can see, everything's just looking a little bit more purple. Now, personally, I have no idea why someone would want to glaze an entire High Elf Archer purple. As I said, the reason that this Archer's got the purple prize is because, well, he was just the first, or these were the first 2 models, because I've got another identical one that I found. But there you go. As you can see, everything about him is looking a bit more purple now. Now, that was just with the Lahmian medium. What we're going to try doing now is, I'm going to add a bit more of the Nagroth Night, to sort of go back a couple of steps. Let's have a look. Maybe this is, yeah, this is what it was like, maybe after that first drop of Lahmian medium. I'm going to add a bit more. There we go. So I've used some Lahmian medium, now I'm going to start adding some water. Now, I used to experiment with loads of things to add water in. In the end, the one that I found best is just an older, very liquid bottle or something of washing up detergent. Obviously make sure it's clean. I've just popped a bit of water on there. Now let's give it a wash. Now, as you know, this is very runny now, and fingers crossed, this looks to me, yes, it's running now. This will be more of a wash medium. Now, the reason we don't just want to add water to our paints to create a wash medium is because that tends to be too runny. You tend to lose all control with that, and it tends to do these really, really impressive smears that you don't want on your mini all over it. But I found that a bit of medium and a bit of water are a good mix. Now let's try it on Elf here. With a wash, I find that I do want a bit more. There we go. And that's yes. As I was saying, with a wash, I found you do need a bit more on your brush than a glaze. But as you see here, it's really collecting here on the recesses. So, really sinking, really bringing out the shades of those fingers, for instance, really bringing out those shades over the hands. So if we compare our two elves, now it'll be really embarrassing for me if they're identical, but I can really see, no, they're not. We've got our glazed elf here, where everything's a bit purple, and our very, very much washed elf here, where the recesses are really, really standing out. And that, my friends, is how we use, or one way of using, our Lahmian medium. So, I hope that's been helpful, folks. Let me know in your comments anything else you'd like to see. My next video up, apart from a short update, should be looking at how we use Lahmian to apply pigments to vehicles. Take care, everyone. Love you and bye.